What's up everyone, welcome to Drummer's Perspective. My name is Ben Todd and I'm here to help broaden your scope of what's possible as a drummer. Thanks so much for checking out the video today, whether you're watching here on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast. I really do appreciate you wherever you're coming in from. If you are here on YouTube though, please subscribe to the channel. That really does help me out. Now today I'm really excited to bring you a conversation I had with the amazing Kosta Theodosis. Now Kosta has just come off the road on a huge tour with Delta Goodrem, playing all through Europe and Australia. But prior to this, Kosta's also played with some incredible artists like Robbie Williams, Miami Horror, the Kite String Tangle, Conrad Sewell. He's really just done so much in his career already. Now in this chat, I speak with him about his journey of starting out studying jazz drums at the Victorian College of the Arts with aspirations to be a solo drummer and clinician, to where he is now of playing with some of the biggest pop and rock touring acts in the country. I also chat with him about how he approaches balancing his family life with being a full-time touring musician, as well as some of his thoughts on what he thinks are really important traits for a drummer to have to be successful as a touring musician, aside from just being a great drummer. So please sit back and relax and enjoy my conversation with Kosta Theodosis. Before we get into today's chat, I want to offer you a free gift just by you being here. And today it's my 5 tips to improve how you play with backing tracks PDF guide. Now we all know that playing along with backing tracks can be super fun and enjoyable, but we can also waste so much precious practice time just jamming along and shredding to them. Now the main issue I hear time and time again with drummers who are playing with backing tracks is this real sense of disconnect between what they're playing and the track itself. It's like they're completely oblivious to all the subtleties and nuances that are going on within the music of the backing track and just in their own little world. Many of the concepts that I discuss in this guide are the exact same concepts that I utilize when I'm asked to record drum tracks for people from my home studio. Here I'm essentially sent a backing track from an artist or musician, and they're asking me to record drums to their music and send it back to them with the ultimate goal of it sounding like I'm playing drums with the band of musicians that have recorded the track. So if you want to improve your overall musical experience of playing with backing tracks, as well as learn some key concepts and ideas about how to dramatically improve as a drummer by focusing on some specific things when you play with backing tracks, then please head to drummersperspective.com/5track-tips and download that free PDF guide right now. All right, Kosta Theodosis, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with me on the Drummer's Perspective podcast. I've been really looking forward to reconnecting with you for a long time. And I guess it must have been like 2004 or 2005 we first met at the Ultimate Drummers Weekend.
Yeah.
And kind of, I remember even back then, like seeing you play and being super impressed by a lot of things, but mainly like just the level of like maturity you seem to have in your playing. Like you're playing stuff that was like way beyond your actual years. And I remember then thinking, man, this guy is really onto something very cool. So yeah, with the wonders of social media and technology, after that point, our careers kind of went in different directions. But now to see you doing what you're doing on the level that you're doing it is super inspiring. Because we kind of met pretty quickly and then didn't see each other for a long time. And then to see what you're doing now it's amazing, man. So, I mean, just start off by saying huge congrats to everything you've been able to achieve so far. It's really cool.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, it's such a pleasure to be here. I love what you're doing with the podcast, and it's so good to have an Australian podcast now. I'm a bit of a podcast fiend, especially drumming related. So to have something cool local really is cool for a lot of us. But thank you. I really appreciate the compliments. And, that was a long time ago now. We were both back in Australia's Best Up and Coming Drummer competition. Yeah. I think it was 2004, like you said. And a lot's happened since then.
Absolutely. A lot in many ways, musically and life and everything in between. So
absolutely.
Yeah, you just have come off a tour with Delta Goodrem, which looked incredible. So I guess like let's maybe just start there and like how did that gig specifically come about for you?
Sure, yeah. So I was working with a phenomenal singer called Conrad Sewell, and he's super underrated, one of the best Australian artists in my opinion. And Delta and her partner Matt, who's the musical director, happened to come down to one of the shows. So that was the initial spark. Only last year that was, but before that, I'd known Matt, the musical director, for close to 15 years now. Back when I was in Amy Meredith, which was a band I was in, all of this seems so long ago, but that was back in around 2010. I knew Matt and Conrad from those days. They were in a band called Sons of Midnight that were doing great things, and every time we'd come to Brisbane, we'd hang out with those guys. So it's a very long-standing relationship, which happens a lot in this industry. Like us, here we are today, 20 years later. So it was quite a similar thing where I'd met Matt, the musical director, years ago, and we're good friends. But just last year, they'd come to a show and loved what I was doing with Conrad and my energy and my playing. And then they asked me to fill in on, it was the AFLW Grand Final. It was a mimed performance at the end of last year. And one thing led to another, and I started working with them around March, probably officially. And that was the first tour. We just got back from Europe. We did a month in Europe as a, Delta hadn't been to Europe for about 20 years. So the original album, Innocent Eyes, came out 20 years ago, and there was a lot of buzz around that. And then for all sorts of reasons, Delta hadn't been able to make it back. So yeah, we got to Europe, and then it was straight in. We had a few days back in Australia to rehearse for the Innocent Eyes 20th anniversary tour, and put the show together unbelievably quickly. And then, just finished the Australian tour a couple of days ago. So,
wow.
Yeah,
man, it says so much about how important relationships are in this industry. Like you mentioned, you can meet someone 15 years ago, like us 20 years ago. And I think now is the time kind of in our lives and our development where we're starting to, us and our friends are starting to do things, in the industry.
Yeah.
So you never know who is going to, allow you an opportunity for another gig or another tour that you met in high school or met, playing in your first band out of school. So it's really
absolutely.
kind of an exciting time.
And it's so cool. What makes me so proud is to see all the guys of our generation who are finally getting into those positions. We've worked so hard, and you look up to all your heroes over the years that have been on these gigs, and just keep pushing forward, wondering if we'll ever get into that position. But being, it's such a dream. And so for me to be with Delta at the moment is such a dream come true. And, all the guys like yourself that are just doing such huge things all over the world. It's really, makes me proud of all of us for not giving up, basically.
Gosh, and again, it says so much for just, like you say, pushing through, because I'm sure like the long practice days in uni or, playing in local bands for not many people and kind of constantly questioning, like, is this going to lead to anything? Is it going to go anywhere? Am I on the wrong path in life? All of that stuff, like, it can seem really hard to imagine yourself in the future doing, the kind of work that you want to be doing. But like you say, it's easier said than done, but you just got to keep going, like keep pushing if you believe in it strong enough and you
never give up.
Enough. Yeah, exactly. Like you are. But I mean, you're a testament to that, not only, talent wise, obviously, but just persistence. Yeah. And keeping going. So, man, it's really cool. And I want to ask then, like, going back a little bit, you started studying jazz at VCA, is that right?
Yeah.
And then kind of, so that transition from, the jazz course, I suppose, or for lack of a better term, and into like the pop rock kind of thing you're doing now, was that kind of always the focus, like to get more into that world? Or did you think about going down the jazz path, improv thing?
Yeah, I did. When I entered uni, I was really into the jazz thing, and that was why I moved to Melbourne, and it was a big interest of mine. But I sort of, once I got into the scene there and started going out a lot, I sort of fell into this indie scene just based on the friends actually that I met at uni. So then I started going to these club nights and things, and I'd see these bands and really loved the bands and loved what I was seeing. So I immediately sort of fell in love with it was at the time. So that was around 2006. This indie scene was huge in Melbourne at the time. And I just fell in love with that. And that sort of became the new path. So when I was at uni, which is advice I give to a lot of people, is you really need to be out playing. A lot of young guys, students that come to me, they have this goal of going to uni and then something's going to magically happen after that. But I was out playing multiple gigs a week with all sorts of different bands, saying at that time I believe is the time to say yes to everything. You never know what situation and scenes you're going to fall into, but nothing will magically happen. So I was out night after night doing all sorts of gigs. I didn't think about getting paid at that time. And each thing did lead to another. So I may be in some random indie band. Back in the day, it was Street Press, and you'd look at the ads in those things to find bands and things. And the very first band I was ever with, we recorded some demos with a great producer in Melbourne, who then recommended me to my first ever, sort of major label artist. It was Dash and Will, which were a female, young duo. And that came from just recording some demos. So one thing led to another in that scene. And that band Amy Meredith opened for those girls at the time. So, and then within 6 months we were, blowing up, and the album came out and did really well. And it all just stemmed from going out, playing, taking any opportunity. So the uni thing itself was great as something for me to do while I was meeting people. I'm sure if I moved more into the jazz world, it would have, those relationships would have came to more, but it tended to be all the things I was doing outside of uni that really led to those things that I did later on.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, like the uni schedule specifically when you're in it can seem like really intense, and there's a lot of work to do, a lot of things to tick off, but it can be dangerous if you're so in that headspace of just study to, like you say, get, spat at the end of a course and then go like, what now? It's a lot to be said for the relationships you build at uni, but it's that next level of kind of drive and work to get out there while you're still studying to kind of set yourself up, everything you do at uni is obviously trying to make you better as a musician, but all the other stuff of actually having a career and where you're going to go and use those skills is like just as important, if not more important in some situations, I guess. Yeah,
equally important, but you have to be obsessed. It's really as simple as that. It was easy for me because I just wanted to play.
Sure.
Every opportunity I would take it, and the uni stuff was great as well. Mainly the ensembles, having the big band and having the Latin ensemble and all these different, and then the small groups that you could, I couldn't compose, but I would do arrangements for and all sorts of things. And, it was a great experience, but what my career ended up being was the things that I was doing in those years to develop relationships and the uni relationships as well. It's 3 great years to build relationships and get experience, I think so.
Yeah, sure. So like Delta Goodrem tour, it looked incredible, and you've done some amazing things prior to that as well. Like, who have been some of the most favorite people you've worked with, and why?
Yeah, so I was in Amy Meredith for the early part of my career and got to achieve a lot of my dreams in about a 2-year period, basically. Yeah, and then that sort of folded at a certain point, I suppose. And then I was a bit lost. So there's been a lot of highs in my career, and there's been a lot of lows. It's music, it's such a tough career path, particularly if you pursue playing with artists, original bands, which I always preferred. And particularly bands is a tough, career trajectory. But but after Amy Meredith, I was a little bit lost, and then I moved to LA, and I just sort of turned up in 2014. I knew one good friend who was living there at the time, and that was enough. And I went out every night and just met people. Once again, I was just trying to meet musicians, and was lucky enough to find myself after 2.5 months in East West Studio 2 recording an album with Robbie Williams.
Wow.
So that was a massive highlight, and getting to do that, obviously. And, then 3 years in LA, it was great. I was playing with a band called Miami Horror, which are an Australian electronic sort of dance act. And we toured South America just nonstop for the 3 years that I was in LA. So just seemingly on a weekly basis, we were in Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, then up to Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. So did that for a long time and absolutely loved that. And then moved home to Australia, and once again was without a gig. And started working with a great Brisbane electronic artist once again. So I've spent a lot of my career more in that electronic realm. And that was the Kite String Tangle, who was a phenomenal artist, and was lucky enough to play with him for a few years, which sort of, then moving on to Conrad pretty recently, which has been amazing. So, and currently, between Delta, Conrad Sewell, and Mashton Kutcher, which is a DJ thing. I love playing with DJs as well, So that's there's been a lot, but it's hard to.
That's a huge scope of highlights for sure. And like playing wise, I guess, like maybe if we can talk about some like playing specific things, like how do you approach playing with like a DJ or like an electronic artist, where I imagine a lot of stuff is like pretty on the grid and synced up, to a gig like Delta, which is, pop rock kind of, organic-y vibes, for lack of a better term, for some of her material. Do you change your mindset in that respect? Like, are you focusing on different things, like really, lining yourself up with the tracks, or, not so much in a band setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all completely case-by-case basis. I have my general energy that I like to bring, and then I'm basically listening for whatever is asked of me. So dynamics is such an important thing. Some people would just love you hitting as hard as you possibly can, and that's what they're looking for. And I love that. But then I play with a lot of people who want a very, I might be playing brushes, hot rods, and so I can be two completely different drummers from one gig to the next. So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm asking questions. Do you want me to play louder? Yeah, just smash them. It's like, great. And having a selection of equipment to do all those various jobs. Yeah. So I sort of got most of the work, I think I got because of my, I play really well with tracks. And for instance, playing with a DJ, you're lining up every 16th note. So if the drums are on the track, it's just a, regular mix of the song. So I've got to double that up and pretty much, if I can, have it with no flamming and just exactly on top of it. So that's one end of the spectrum, which I love doing, and I've done a lot of that. But then with Conrad Sewell, for instance, he was putting together a new band, completely live, no tracks, no click, no nothing. And he just made his last album in LA with the top my heroes. For instance, Victorian Drizzo is on drums, who's my absolute hero, seems to be about the busiest session drummer in LA right now. And absolutely love his playing. So that was the polar opposite, where I've been playing all these gigs to click, triggers, a lot of electronics, etc. And then going to I wanted to copy Victor's feel, every ghost note as closely as I could. And that was a very, dynamic thing. And Delta's sort of in the middle because there's a lot of, for instance, the Innocent Eyes tour we just did, there was a lot of loops, and like in 2003 when the album came out, it was sort of that sound where there'd be the intro would have a drum loop, and then the big live drums would come in for the verse or chorus or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's actually a bit of both, where I've been for the Innocent Eyes tour, I've been really locked in with the tracks, and then it has its looser moments as well. But it's all relevant. So that's the thing. You need to be able to play loose with no click, and it comes down to a few key things, I believe, that make any drummer highly employable. And the first one I would say is timing. So we're, as drummers, we're always worrying about all our flashy chops and shredding and stuff, but every single artist I've talked to, or whatever, the most issues you can have on stage is based on timing alone. And it's not as simple as being able to play to a metronome in your house or whatever, because you're so influenced by the timing of all the other players on stage, especially where there's no click, and a lot of guys are feeling it behind. One guy's feeling, way ahead, and it's you have to be so confident with where you're feeling the time and going, well, I think it's here, so let's go. Let's go with that, and holding the band together, but also being fluid enough to, if everyone's fighting you, you might have to go with them a little bit, but definitely. And that, man, there's so much in there, but incredible advice. But I guess, say like on the tour you were just on, how much kind of analysis and feedback are you getting, like once the shows start going, like you guys, discussing how the gig went last night? Oh, we should tidy this up, this wasn't so great, I really like this. Like, do you have that kind of dialogue, or is it mostly just like once you're in, you go and it's pretty set? No, absolutely. There's a lot of that, particular from Delta, because she's just so creative. She's constantly thinking about how she can improve the show. So if something doesn't quite feel right, we'll definitely go over that at soundcheck the next day. And there's always adjustments and editing to the live show, even not on that tour, but in previous tours, right throughout the tour, it can be making those adjustments. But because we were playing an album front to back and it was a bit more clear what our goal was, there was less of that, but definitely, even from a drumming perspective, Matt has a great ear, who's the musical director, Matt Copley, and he will ask for specific things, or if he wants me to be a bit more washy on a ride cymbal, or very specific little things that he's just hearing from the drums, and that's great, because I always want to give them exactly what they're looking for. So definitely. Wow. Okay, so you have done a lot of played in a lot of different situations, like recording, arenas, festivals, TV. What are some of the most important skills you think younger drummers should be thinking about, and any drummer really should be thinking about, if they want to get into this kind of work, like besides just being a great drummer? Like, totally.
There's certain mental kind of things that you need to have in check, or is there certain physical like workout health things that you think are really important for a long tour? Like, I'd love to hear some what your thoughts are on that stuff. Like, aside from drumming, what are some important things to make you successful and
happy
in that kind of work?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's taken me a while to sort of get to that point myself.
Sure.
But the health and fitness, I would say, that's sort of the biggest thing that I've, only in the last couple of years turned to, where I used to find myself getting a bit down on tour. But the number one thing that changed that was we get to the gym all the time with Delta's band in particular. Most days, in fact, or even throughout Europe, we would either go, if we'd go at the hotel, and if that wasn't good enough, we'd get a day pass to a gym, somewhere else. We'd go find it. We'd eat well. That's such a big thing. A lot of young bands, it's expensive. That's the problem. When you're in a young band touring, you're just eating cheap, rubbish all the time, which I did. I was very guilty of that.
Sure.
But getting to the point where you can really get those things together, it makes it so much easier. So, even this morning before doing this, I went to the gym so I could have my thoughts together a little more. And there's so much that comes from it. Even just the relationships within the band, because that's an extra thing we're doing together, becoming closer and working hard and getting those endorphins going. And we're all so we're starting the day from a really happy place, as opposed to waking up tired, not feeling so good. So that's been a big one. But the touring experience in general really has been good for me as sort of to learn to not react to things. There's so much that can go wrong on any given day, from flight delays and missed connections, especially internationally, to lost baggage, and all these things are happening quite consistently, where your equipment doesn't turn up and you've got to make do with whatever's there. And there's no point in even having a bad attitude about it, let alone complaining. It's as simple as, okay, yep. Is there some backline symbols? Is there, sure. Can we find an SPD and load it up? Like, all right, let's do it. Yeah. All those things, I don't know of anyone on any of the gigs that I've been on that really complains about those things. Everyone just gets on with the job, and that's why they're there. There's no room for having a bad attitude or complaining. But yeah, the diet is such a big one. Alcohol is such a big one as well. It's nice to be in an environment where there's not a lot of drinking going on, especially when you're in your own band, that can sort of get out of control a little more. And it's, such a strange industry where you turn up to the show and there's all these bottles of alcohol just waiting for you. It's like, alrighty then.
Yeah, sure, totally.
So at this level, obviously that isn't the case, but in, bands going up and all the bands, I'm doing a lot of festivals and things in, previous years, and that's sort of the vibe. So staying away from that is sort of possibly the number one thing. But,
I mean, I guess that speaks so much to your experience and maturity to have gone through that and get to a point where you've realized to give your best, performance wise every day, this is what it takes. And I think, it's a little bit like you can try and pass that advice on to, younger people, but until they're ready to hear it or have gone through it a little bit too, it sometimes can be difficult to comprehend. But it's so true. It's so true. Everything you're saying is yes, I agree 100%, because it's just, you don't realize how much better you can play and feel and enjoy the whole experience if you just have some of that stuff more in check. But again, coming up, when you're a young musician developing, you're just in that world of just trying to get better technically at what you do. So all that other stuff is just it's hard to kind of have space for that mentally to learn about it. But yeah, now that you're in the position you're in, doing the gigs that you are, and it's kind of expected that you just, performance has got to be 100% every day. So whatever you have to do to get to that point, you do it. But yeah, man, incredible advice.
100%. Every show needs to be perfect. I try and, it's a pretty crazy thing that every touch of the instrument for an hour and a half straight has to be perfect. And whatever your intention for that note was, there's no room, I'll beat myself up for a week if I make a mistake.
Yeah, sure.
Which, you shouldn't do. I obviously in the moment move on as fast as possible, but still you want to be consistent. You don't want anyone to be turning around at you and being like, what's that? So all those things really get you to that level of consistency as well.
Sure. Yeah. I guess along those lines of aiming for as close to perfection as you can get, in a situation where you've got it's a high pressure thing. Say it's like you were saying before, AFL Women's Grand Final performance, or a TV slot, or an awards show, or something like that, where it's you're on, everything's in the moment, a lot of eyes, a lot of pressure. Is there anything different that you do in those kind of situations to prepare yourself for that exact moment where it's like it's on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm breathing a lot, like deep breaths. It's so hard. That stuff's really hard. And I have nightmares about it going, I've been fine on all those gigs so far. Somehow, miraculously, you just up your game and nail it and nothing goes wrong. But I'm just waiting for the one that I just completely botch. But it's focus. I think over time, same as getting to that level of consistency with the gigs. I think that's what it is, where over time you just build up the amount of focus. So when you're younger, I was in a band with a guy who would just sort of lose track of where he was in the song. He'd be daydreaming during the song and suddenly not know where he was. And then a producer who I was working with a lot when I was younger, Barry Palmer from Hunters and Collectors, he was telling us at the rehearsal, he goes, when I'm playing with Hunters and Collectors, I'm 100% focused on what I'm doing for the entire show. I'm not thinking about what I'm having for dinner or anything like that. He's thinking about what he's playing the entire time. And so that's what it comes down to for me. I'm 100% focused on every note that I'm playing and just really in the moment. I don't let myself think about anything else. I just want to nail every single note. And that's, every show is the same. So whether it's a really high pressure thing or another show, I put that same level on myself, where in the live show, I want it to be that good, but it's an hour and a half. So now I've only got to do it for 3 or 4 minutes, but it's the same. I treat it the same, but just breathing for the anxiety of it. But aside from that, it's focusing.
Focus. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And do you think that there's anything you can do, like just thinking about like any advice for younger guys, like, or anyone really, anything you can do to get better at that like aside from just doing it a lot, like aside from just doing a bunch of gigs and tours and being in high pressure events, is there anything breathing exercises would you say is like something that people should work on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big thing that has only recently come to a lot of our attention, thanks to guys like Dave Elich, is the not holding tension in weird parts of your body, which we all do. Totally. And even the face is the one I didn't really realize until as much, because your teacher might talk to you about the arms and legs and hands and things, but they don't really talk about how much we then end up holding in our face to counteract what we've just done with our bodies. So with Conrad, we had Michael Iverson, the great drummer, come in as a musical director. And he was helping us sort of achieve the sound that we wanted. And he brought that to my attention. He's like, "You're holding so much tension in your face." And I'm like, whoa. I had my feet are good, my hands are good. But then you're just like, so that's really cool. But what I would say about developing that level of consistency is treating every single time you play the instrument as a performance. So like I was saying with the live show, if I do a wedding, I think to myself, we might be playing a Beyonce song or something, and I would go, well, this has to be good enough for Beyonce. Like, it doesn't matter that it's just a wedding and maybe, the band's not sounding that good. I would love to do a gig of that level. Therefore, I have to hold myself to that standard no matter what the gig is. I'm not just like, messing around or giving a 50% performance. So I think even if you're just playing at home, I wouldn't, you can jam for fun along to music and stuff, but I would treat it as if you were doing the gig. That's just a headspace thing that I personally have, where it's like, well, I want to play with this band, so I got to make sure I'm capable of doing that.
Sure.
I
think that that raises an interesting question I wanted to ask you about as well. Like, when you are off of the road, like you come off of this incredible tour all over the world, are you doing local gigs? Are you doing other gigs? Or are you just like, are you kind of, is there too much banked up tour wise and to commit to anything else?
Yeah, no, I play locally. I have a bunch of just what, usually with close friends or
Cool.
I say no to a lot of things
Sure, sure.
because there's a family aspect
Yeah.
as well. I've got
Yeah.
3 kids and a wife, so drums might be everything to me, but it's not to the children and my
Sure,
wife.
sure. Yeah. Man, 100%. I get that for sure. And that leads me actually onto something else. Like, yeah, you have a family, which is incredible. Like, huge congratulations to you for that too. And that balance thing is something that I think any musician who has a family, goes through ups and downs of trying to figure out what that is. And I don't really think there's a formula, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, do you have certain rules in place with your family? Like, you're only away for a certain amount of time, or you don't play at home, or you're always there for certain things, or like, do you have anything like that, or is it just like everything is case by case?
A bit of both. Well, everything firstly is a conversation. I can't just say yes to a gig. That's not my decision to make. It's mine and my wife's decision to make. So there's a conversation there, whether it's something that I, really would like to do, or, really should do, or whatever, and what that means. But I don't really play at home. That is one,
Sure.
I was teaching a lot up until recently. I was teaching, but then that became every afternoon. So it's like, well, that's not really a great time for the family.
Yeah.
For me to be doing that. So that's something I let go of recently, was the teaching. But yeah, everything is case by case. And I don't know if I come back from a tour, there was a lot of local things this month that I sort of, it was like, I think I'll spend some time with the family before I get busy again. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And, drumming as a full-time income, it's kind of hard. So we've, because of that, moved into sort of some other areas of income, and, working on passive investments and things. So yeah, it depends what your financial goals are, what your family's financial goals are. If your partner's happy to have you out gigging all the time, because the money, the money's great in Australia. We make great money to play local gigs, whether it's, weddings, even pubs, and functions pay well these days. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of things that I want to get into. You mentioned about playing in pubs, and I saw that you and your wife bought a pub a few years ago. Is that right? That's incredible. Like, huge, man. What was kind of the catalyst for that? Was it something like you wanted to do, like to step away from drums, or was it something you wanted to do and still keep playing? And like, what was that kind of the mental approach for that?
For sure. I did want to step away from drums a little. So I'd just been so flat out with this career, and then I was looking to tour less, so I was playing a lot locally, which then had its own challenges. So yeah, just looking at things outside of music that I could do, which isn't a lot of things, because I've played drums my whole life, and all through high school, just practicing every morning, every night. You don't pick up some maybe normal skills that other people have, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah, we got into real estate a little bit, and renovating some houses and stuff. So basically the pub came up as a renovation project. It was an old dilapidated building, no licenses or anything attached to it, and we just had a vision and a goal to turn it into a live music venue. And sort of we did that. We bought it in October 2019 and set about renovating it for the next 6 months. Opened right on schedule in early March 2020.
Wow. Okay.
And then and then COVID hit we were open for 1 week with no restrictions. The second week there was some restrictions, and then we were closed for 3 months after that.
Wow.
But it was good because we had a young daughter at the time. So, I appreciated then having 3 months just at home with her. That was the first one. And then, reopened, and we did some amazing things there. We hosted a heap of original artists and local, really created a nice original local scene. And then I had a house band every Thursday night.
Wow.
Fenny and the Mets, we're called, and with some really great local musicians, and we played every Thursday. So yeah, all sorts,
Yeah. Do you still own it, or you
Yeah, we've
sold
still
it?
got it. So
Oh,
yeah.
cool. Man, that's incredible. Because I think like something I love to kind of talk about and promote with this whole channel and it is the fact that like you can do so much with like a drumming skill set and a drumming mindset. You don't have to be like to have a successful career. You don't just have to think about like using what you know as a drummer just to play drums. Like all the experience of the dedication and passion that you develop to get better at drums, you can then apply to like owning a pub and like I'm going to make this the best pub that I can. Like you focus on like I want to make this the best paradiddle lick I can pull out. It's that same kind of drive, and I think that's super important, especially nowadays. Like to just diversify your skill set a little bit than just just playing drums. And it sounds like you're doing that now, with real estate and passive income and owning a venue, which it's huge.
Yeah. Well, everything's just so expensive now. It's becoming impossible. And the stress of always, you can't be your best as a musician if you're just constantly stressed out about making, 100% of your living from it. And you also can't make the best decisions with what gigs you want to do, because I've done it myself where a fantastic tour with a dream artist has come up, but I've had, and at last minute, a lot of this stuff happens last minute. So it's like, some things happen to the drummer, this stuff is real. It happens so often. It's like, can you do the tour? It starts this Friday, but I'll have, a couple of months, and it'll be a long tour. I'll have a couple of months of, 3 covers gigs a week booked in. And those guys have been good to me and provided me a living for, an amount of time. So I don't, I can't do that tour because I want to make sure that I've got these gigs coming in consistently that have been really good to me.
Sure.
So all those things, whereas now I can do the tour. It's like whatever comes up, it's like, yep, let's go. Let's do it. Yeah. I'm lucky that sort of we've had 3 kids in a very short amount of time, but they're sort of out of the baby stage now. So I've got a little more freedom. It's all those things. So
that's amazing, man. That leads me to something else I wanted to talk about with you, and that's like how far in advance do you say yes to a gig? Like I've spoken to some guys who they say tours are often booked sometimes like a year in advance or something like that. Do you have anything in place for yourself where you try and leave yourself some space based on anything in particular, or are you just looking at it like, okay, 6 months time that should be safe for XYZ?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So for me, I would be happy to book a tour far in advance because that's my priority, as opposed to I get a bit weird about booking weddings and local gigs really far in advance. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I really don't, just as a positive person, I'm like, I don't want to think that that's the gig I'm going to be doing in 12 months from now.
Sure.
I'd rather be thinking I'll be in, some exotic location with Delta at that time of my life. So I try not to book the local things. It's sort of organize my touring schedule and what I'm doing with that. And then, even if something's near that, like a local thing, I'll sort of, say no to that one just in case the schedule changes. It's always awful having to pull out on something, especially just any situation. It just feels awful. But,
Totally.
we have to, in the end, you have to look after yourself. You can't say no to a great tour just because you've booked in a couple of little local things, as much as, an old school person might say, well, that's the commitment you've made.
Yeah.
But there's so many other factors.
In that time.
Yeah, exactly. So stick to, and the thing is, the type of gigs you do and accept tend to be the type of gigs that you get. So if you want to tour with successful and great artists, you kind of need to do that in order to get more of that. Like I said, I was touring with Conrad Sewell, and Delta and Matt saw me there and thought I'd be a great fit for their band. Whereas the periods in my life I've done a lot of weddings, I've gotten asked to do a lot more weddings. You know, if it's pub gigs, suddenly you're the pub guy.
Yeah. It's definitely the company you keep in that situation. And it brings up an interesting thought of like curating your image and curating your future, you know, because like you say, if you want to be touring with big name artists, but people see you playing, like an afternoon, you know, acoustic gig in a bar, like nothing against that, but like, it's just, they don't see you in their minds as being able to do that, you know, that big thing. So you might be saying no to things, like saying no to money and saying no to a gig, just to kind of, you know, make yourself, present yourself a certain way, I suppose, and chase what you really, really want to do.
Yeah. So you need to prioritize. But even, you know, if you want to work with artists, it's one thing to say, well, work with artists in order to do that. Yeah. It's not that simple. Yeah. But so I suggest to all the, you know, my young students that you need to find an artist on whatever level. So an original singer, even, you know, no matter how small the gig is, that is still much more likely to step by step lead you up to that huge gig, as opposed to a trap I think a lot of people get caught up in is making really good money from a young age, where they might fall into the wedding scene at, you know, 18, straight out of school. And once you're used to making that sort of money for a gig, it's very difficult then to do the ones that are more likely to lead you to really great things in your career. So that's a tricky one, because we all need to make a living. But for me personally, it hasn't been a wedding gig or a pub gig that's led me to the really cool gigs that I get to do. Yeah,
sure. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, for sure. But you're right. Like, it's hard to get that experience, you know, without experience sometimes.
Yeah.
So, I guess, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the level of stuff you're doing now. Like, you know, we all started kind of at the same place of just practicing a lot and going through school and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything that you're using every day in your drumming toolkit, I suppose, that you really worked on a lot when you were younger, that you're very grateful for now? Like, did you consciously, like, you play with, like, obviously great energy and kind of, you bring a lot to the performance, and I would imagine bring a lot out of the other musicians you're playing with. Was that something that you like worked on when you were younger, or were you just more like chops driven and you're using that more? Like what's something that you're grateful to have worked on in the past that you're utilizing every day?
That's a really interesting question. Well, for me, not as much, because in school I was independence man and multi-pedal orchestrations. Grant Collins was my teacher. Cool. And so that was my obsession. I wanted to be a solo drummer. You know, I wanted to either be a clinician or do solo drumming concerts. Even at uni, most of my performances were solo.
Sure.
So that was a heavy focus for me. And then it was through being in bands, I quickly developed that, and really wanting to, you know, be involved with the other band members on stage. So not at that age, but from when I was, you know, out of school, say out of uni even, I spent a lot of time tuning drums, because maybe I lived in a place where I couldn't play, but I loved pulling apart my drums and putting them back together. So something that's actually been really useful is my tuning abilities and being able to pull tones out of drums. So I love recording. I do a lot of recording, and I love getting the specific sound, you know, having a collection of instruments, for instance. So when I need, you know, I don't have a specific sound as a drummer. I'm trying to find that perfect tone for the track, cymbals, snares, drum, you know, the kit, everything. So pulling apart drums and taking them from their lowest tuning all the way up to their highest and everything in between, and getting really familiar with the way the drum works and the way it sounds, and thinking of a drum tone or trying to match the sound of a record just acoustically, you know, without EQ and without all that other stuff, just getting it from the source. And that's been so beneficial to me, especially doing sessions and things where I come in with the kit sounding like I would want the record to sound. And then every track, it's like, all right, I reckon this is the snare sound for this one. I'm working with the engineer and the producer on that. So for me, I've found that as important as the playing, even where, you know, a lot of drummers might be a phenomenal drummer, but then they come in and the sound of the drums isn't quite matching up with what the artist or the musical director had in mind. So it's having that toolbox of tuning and tones and you know, even in the studio, there might be a strange ring in the drum, and knowing immediately how to fix that in seconds, as opposed to like, oh, I don't, you know, So for me, the playing stuff developed just by taking every playing opportunity, playing with everyone, and listening to the advice from everybody around me, as opposed, you know, because when I was younger, I'd worked on purely technical, crazy things, multi-pedal orchestrations, and all the polyrhythmic stuff and the Gary Chaffee stuff. And that was really my focus. And people, you know, it's possible that has, you know, my playing to a metronome, doing all the, you know, all the polyrhythmic stuff has developed my understanding of rhythm and time and given me a, you know, really good understanding of that. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure.
If that's the case.
It's one of those things that, like, in hindsight, it's hard to figure out sometimes, like what were the things that have led you to the point you're at now, because it's, you know, it's the sum of all the parts really coming together to make you who you are now. But yeah, that is really interesting to go from that. It's kind of like the opposite of what you're doing now, you know, like solo, like, you know, stuff to like bands and playing with DJs and things like that. But I'm sure a super necessary skill set development to get to that point. So, but it brings that, when you mentioned about like tuning, you know, and getting the sound out of a drum, that makes a lot of sense, because, as you know, like, if the drums sound a certain way, they'll make you play a certain way to some degree as well.
Absolutely.
So if you, especially in a session, if you're trying to get, you know, evoke a certain emotion, or, you know, replicate a certain drummer's feel, having the right sounding gear can make like all the difference to get that out of you. So it's this, super necessary skill set. And do you have, like, leading on from that, do you have a space for all of your gear, and are you like practicing in that space at all, like semi-regularly still, or is it just kind of when a tour comes up you're in there?
Yeah, I have a space, but it's more so, you know, it's hard with the kids for them to allow me to be in there for any length of time. Sure. So if I'm playing, it's mainly with the kids, you know, they all have fun, you know, playing the drums and stuff. But yeah, all of it's stored here, and I do. It's mainly prep for tours, you know, because for me, I like to get a bunch of reps under the belt and really run the songs beforehand, and, you know, preparation, you know, is a big thing. Like, if you can turn up, it just puts people's mind at ease. Like, if they're not really familiar with your playing and you come into the first rehearsal, there may only be one rehearsal. But if you're coming in and just nailing it, like, hopefully better than the last guy that was on the gig.
Totally.
You know, everyone's like, oh, yes, this is going to be great. I don't have to stress out. Because, you know, artists get very nervous and about bringing new people into the band, not sure if it's going to be the right dynamic. The playing, you know, there's so many factors. And one small thing, even small mistakes, I see them like get worried. Like, is this guy going to be able to do it? Yeah. And it was like nothing. You know, so for that, I really like to come in and just nail it. So I definitely, you know, I'd love to get back into practicing for the fun of it. You know, just from doing this bunch of touring, it was such a long run with Delta. My hands have really come back actually, which I wasn't doing any practice, but just from the playing, I've really gotten some facility back. So I'm excited to sort of launch off of that. And, you know, it's just such an endless pursuit.
Oh yeah. 100%. But it's, you know, like I said in the beginning, to see like your progression even through the eyes of social media and like how you've developed over the years is so inspiring. So again, huge congrats, man. I guess I want to try and wrap it up with maybe like you mentioned before about, you know, getting advice from everywhere, from all different people and sources, and like what's been some of the best advice that someone's given you, you know, drum related or life related, that you think is, you know, is resonating true for you, you know, today? Wow,
I wish I had something prepared for this.
No,
that's a good one.
I know it's a big question, but yeah, I think like, yeah, there's certain things that I think, you know, stick with people for a while, and for whatever reason, and they change. You know, for me, they change on a day-to-day basis. You know, things I'll remember, but yeah, I'd love to hear. Like, is there anything that's like that you kind of go back to thinking about?
Well, the big one is what I said earlier about Barry Palmer saying to be focused when you're on stage, and that I do think about that every time I play.
Sure. Because
I realize every single note needs some form of attention. You can't, because as soon as you're not, one note on the hi-hat I may not be thinking about, and it's a bit, you know, then it suddenly sounds a little inconsistent. So I think it sounds simple, but there's so much more to it. You know, I would doubt that every young musician, when they get on stage, is 100% focused on every note. The dynamic of every hit, you know, you don't just hit a crash cymbal. I'm thinking about the exact tone that I would like to get out of that crash, whether, you know, and having, you know, I have a more slightly aggressive sounding crash and a more smoother, buttery one. And it's like, well, this cymbal hit, I'm going to go for that one and hit it at this velocity. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, there's so much in that. Like you say, it sounds simple, but like you can spend a lifetime working on your focus, I think. You know, everything channeled with it.
Yeah.
For sure. Man, so this has been really incredible, honestly, to like reconnect and like hear your incredible experience and wisdom and everything you've been through already. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who get a lot out of this chat. So thank you again. Where can people find you and follow you if they want to check out what you're doing? Yeah,
Instagram's the best. I'm not the most active on there, but it's Kosta_Theodosis on Instagram. Kosta with a K.
Great.
But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, man. It's been great to have a chance to reconnect. So I hope we can do it again in person one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. Thank you again, Kosta.
No worries at all.
Have a great day.
Cheers, you too.